Okay, so what I heard in your response is being prepared and making sure that you have things lined up so that you can actually be successful. But one of the things that we know about entrepreneurship is that you are going to fail. So it's not going to always be where everything is going to work out perfectly, because that's just the nature of entrepreneurship. It is very trial and error. So I do agree having your personal finances in order, because that is going to determine whether or not you can get any type of funding. I do agree with having some kind of plan, because you need to have some kind of direction as to what you want to go. So what I want to ask now is, so we know that there are different types of entrepreneurship in terms of what is a startup, and then what is someone that's just actually trying to build a business from the ground up, where you're actually bootstrapping your business and you're funding it yourself. So can Chelsea, would you start off by talking about the venture capital piece and how that relates to a startup enterprise, and then maybe Jada kind of give us a little feedback about how did you get your business started from a finance standpoint.
Um, can you repeat the first part of the question? So you want me to break down the process? Mm.
Yeah, yeah, to explain what venture capital is and how that kind of relates to the startup industry.
Yeah, so venture capital essentially is about um, it's about getting the funding that you need um, for these startups, and there's different rounds and things that you go through, and the things that it requires. Um, a lot of what so a lot of what our founders are dealing with right now with HBCU VC. They come to us with a pitch deck, but they really need to get in front of like the firms, and these angel investors, and so I guess from the perspective of what our organization does, we really just kind of arm them with those tools, and speaking to the ecosystem that my other panelists spoke about, we really are about providing that network. So from the entry point of our fellows, when they're learning about venture capital for the first time, when we have Black and Brown faculty teaching them, a lot of these Black and Brown faculty are HBCU graduates. They are sitting at firms like Foundry or Accenture or things like that. So they're teaching them these fundamentals, and then our fellows go on to eventually serve on investment committees, to bring them into the HBCU VC network, where ultimately our lab fund provides them with that seed funding that helps them get started. So a lot of our um, some of our early founders, when we started our organization in 2017, and our first lab fund founders who received funding were like in 2019, 2020, just before the pandemic was hitting. um, and so those organizations are doing well now, and they're going on now to request funding from other groups like Grid 110, Slauson and Co. out in California. A lot of them are in kind of like in the Silicon Valley, network now. A lot of other entrepreneurs are in these major cities like Charlotte and Atlanta. Atlanta's ecosystem for startups is booming right now. We have some staff members who transitioned because they were, doing their own entrepreneurial things. And that's the other thing about this industry. An entrepreneur is going to, we entrepreneurs connect, but there's always going to be that rotation of like connecting with somebody else who does this thing, that does this thing, that lateral networking, that lateral authentic networking, not just trying to do a transactional network to because people see through that. a lot of times, especially in VC. And that's a lot of times you're not going to get that funding. Um, it's hard enough, in VC, but it's about the long game, but it's also about connecting with somebody, because if, as much as you believe in your product or your idea, um, having these connections, these interactions with folks, um, it's really going to get you far. And I know it sounds very cliche, like the dollars going to get you far, but like Jarlicia said, if you don't know how to deal with your money, then it's really not gonna get you anywhere. But all of that to say, that's kind of how the HBCU VC ecosystem works. We have our lab fund founders, we have the fellows who source them and make recommendations for who should get funding. We have partnering firms who are we work with to get those internships for the fellows. So after they go through our module training, all right, first step, summer internship. If you do well, make a name for yourself, boom, like that's your early career launch pad. And the way HBCU relationships work, it's like, hey, I have like a friend from Morehouse who's really interested in this. I'm gonna try to get him to sign up for the fellowship. And then a lot of times they're the ones who are doing like our Q&A or info sessions for prospective students who are like, what is VC? Like a lot of Morgan State University, Bowie State, DMV area, we have like a heavy presence within HBCU VC. And these are also metro areas where we have VC firms working with us. So we're just trying to build it up and make this thing kind of, we want to touch all HBCUs ultimately. And I heard Morris Brown is accredited again. So we trying to get to the AUC and take over. But that's kind of like how VC works, very relationship based. But yeah, I don't know if I really kind of answered that question, but it's really about that VC, in order for the money to roll through, it's about kind of getting your face out there and making those connections.
You did. I just wanted you to kind of give a little bit, of an explanation, like what that process looks like, and that even though you have a really good idea, then of course that doesn't mean that you're going to instantly get funded for that idea, and that it is a process, and that sometimes you may need to be working on your own personal investment while you're waiting to get that funding from someone else. So, Jada, why don't you tell us how you funded your business?
Yeah, sure.
What process you go through?
So I first want to mention ways in general for freelancers and independent contractors of ways that you can get funding. I think from this pandemic, we've all learned that there are grants, and they actually already existed before a pandemic. Most people just don't apply for them. And so there are plenty of grants out here available. There's a lot of money out here. The way that people are weeded out is just by not applying. And so, a lot of people don't like to do application processes, and so they weed themselves out. And aside from grants and, obviously your own personal funding, like most independent contractors, freelancers, you start with your own funding and own money. And so for myself, having an existing service-based business with some product-based components, and previously owning multiple product-based businesses, I have had an apparel line myself. Also, I've had a self-defense accessories line, as well as I have a travel brand. And so with those businesses, I always, and it takes time, right? And so one of my first freelance independent contractor business was resume writing, which I still do, been doing for over 15 years. And one of the things I learned very early was get my money up front. And so I knew that I would spend because I am an oversharer. I really just, especially when it comes to recruiting into resumes, I love to help people find and land that role. So I would have given them a whole consultation of all the things that I would change and do, then send them an invoice, right? So then they can just go and do an attempt. And most times a lot of people would still circle back and be like, hey, so I think I still need you, after they would attempt it on themselves, but it would have been time lost, right? And so that's one of the first things I would tell people. Like, if you're in a service-based business, you need to get a deposit or some type of compensation up front once a contract and an agreement is signed, or whatever that statement of work is, whatever documentation, because you need documentation, whatever the documentation is. As a service-based business owner, make sure you have some type of monetary deposit to say, okay, yes, I'm serious about doing business with you, and I know that if I don't do business with you, that money is lost. And so then when it comes down to a product-based business, from myself and so forth, and what I would recommend for anybody that may be very new in like especially when it comes to like apparel, or even if it's not apparel, I mean, it could be cups, it could be really anything. Consider pre-orders, right? And so that way you can get a sense of what people really want to buy and what they're really interested in. I did it with my book. And for me, my pre-order period was not from a financial standpoint, although I knew that it would be beneficial for me, so I wouldn't have to front most of the money. The purpose for me was for marketing, but I knew that from doing business enough that pre-orders, when I first started out in my apparel line, Grind Match, which I trademarked, Shut Up, Keep Grinding, I spent so much money up front, because I ended up with a million larges left over, because apparently nobody actually wears a large. And then or so many smalls left over, extra larges and mediums gone. And I was like, okay, if I want to do the next release, I got to figure something else out. So I made like an exclusive release, right? And that way I was able to do pre-orders to really assess my customer base, because I can say that, over the 5 years I ran that business, I had consistent customers or customer types. So I kind of knew my customer avatar very well. And so I knew how they would shop and what they would buy and the sizes that were most likely to be sold. And so pre-orders really helped me a lot. And so I would definitely recommend anybody starting out in a product-based business, do pre-orders. That's going to help you from a marketing standpoint as well as a financial standpoint. You create a sense of urgency. You create a limited time offer. You can push it that way so that you're not using your personal funding. I actually was able to operate Grind Match without using any of my personal funds, and until I closed the business last year. And so I was able to just recycle the money back into the business, covering my overhead. Also, for product-based business owners, this is something that still aligns with funding. So I think I would be remiss if I don't mention it, is consider drop shipping. Drop shipping, your profit margin will be lower. You will make less, but you will spend less as well. So you don't have the overhead costs of managing the inventory on hand. And so you don't have to worry about those costs, which would be normal operational costs for a business owner. And there will be startup costs that you don't necessarily have to absorb, because you would have the opportunity to drop ship. And for those that are not familiar with drop shipping means if you, my customer, buys a shirt from me, the shirt order goes through, just say, a Shopify website that I've built. And I have a warehouse that's going to print and ship the shirt directly to you while I'm still managing the order on the back end. And so that's one of the things that I do. I help e-commerce business owners kind of launch and start their Shopify and Wix websites. And so I know that the beauty of drop shipping, I know that it can be very lucrative if you do it right and if you market it right, and it can definitely be less on your pockets. So for me, those are the methods that I took. And then as well as, of course, personally investing. So when I think about the money I've invested, it's tens of thousands and thousands of dollars over the course of years. But when I think about my most recent business, is service-based, resume writing services in general, and business consulting. So that's service-based. So I get a deposit up front, and the remaining balance. So it's not a lot of the investment on my end. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, it did. So what I want to ask now, and so this is one of the questions, and because the research that I've been doing on entrepreneurship, we know that younger people, 20 years ago, no one really had all of these different workshops and training on how to be an entrepreneur. So it was kind of like, during my time in college, there was nothing about this as a part of the curriculum. So, and a lot of students, now that they see that they have the creativity to do things, they are opting for not like working a traditional job, because they have the creativity. So this question is what I want to ask. As a millennial entrepreneur, what advice would you give to Generation Z? And Justin, why don't you start with that? And from a financial standpoint, Jarlicia, why don't you kind of talk about what they need to do starting out?
Yes, great question, Paula, especially because half of my students in college are either the lower end of the millennial spectrum to Gen Z, and also to others as well. And so what I typically say is, first, be okay with creating your own blueprint. Note that it's going to be tougher because there's no pathway. So that means you have to literally lay the gravel and do all this extra work. However, if that passion is there, if you're following all the rules in which we're talking about, preparation is key. Research, y'all, research. And note that you may be creating the research as you go, because there was no Facebook before Facebook. I mean, we had MySpace and Black Planet. Shout out to us back in the day, y'all. But when things are new, you want to be mindful that it's going to take particularly more work. And what they've witnessed is their parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles hit that glass ceiling, come home exhausted, still unable to pay bills. And in the words of the prophetess, ain't nobody got time for that. So, and I'm so happy that students now are realizing that they don't have to accept the status quo. And so what they're doing is, well, let me see if this works. So, I don't know about everyone else, but I kind of grew up in that time where it's like, if you're not doing this at 30, life is over. Y'all, 30 isn't old. So I'm happy now that by the time that Gen Z is 21, they've already had 2 and 3 businesses. And they've pivoted. Oh, that's not working. They started a YouTube channel back in the day. Now they're on TikTok making millions. And then all of a sudden they may do a brick and mortar. Now they have brand deals. So I think that generation is the example of pivoting, and not necessarily out of necessity. Oh, I have a better idea now. It's like, oh, so that's what, like, be okay with it, knowing how to pivot, understand that it may take more work, but they have the energy and they have the time. So I always encourage that.
From a financial perspective, what I would share with Gen Z as they're starting their entrepreneurial journey is that preparation is very important. I had a conversation about this at the university I attended last year, and I don't know. I think from my perspective and what I'm doing, just speaking of myself, I am currently working and learning and taking in so much information. So when I do become an entrepreneur, Jarlicia's name is already out there. People are already understand my skill set. I've had the opportunity to work with other people in the accounting and finance world. In addition to, I'm making money, I'm saving money and preparing to launch my business when the time is right. You are going to be the first person to invest in yourself. I get so many startups from a lending perspective where they want us to fund 100% of their business. There's no skin in the game. If you fail, it's on the bank. It's not on you. And so you have to understand entrepreneurship. I have a lady that I'm working with, and she's like, Jarlicia, I've been eating ramen noodles for the past 2 years. I'm going back to college days. because she's investing everything into her business. Like she understands this is the sacrifice that she has to take. And so I would say for Gen Zers, as you are starting your business, if you can find a job that's within your industry, take that job, learn, absorb, meet people, connect, save the money, and prepare so that whenever you're ready to launch, you'll have your seed money to go into that business. And you might have to work a couple of years while you're doing that business or a couple of months. And when I talk to a lot of people, we see the end goal in mind. I'm going to have an entire warehouse, 500 employees, centers all across the US. But you have to understand that's going to come in stages. It's not going to happen as soon as you launch your business. So if you're opening up your cookie shop, it might be, I'm selling cookies. I'm baking these cookies out of my kitchen at home, going to the church and selling them. And then you know what? I'm blowing up. I might have to go into the commercial kitchen and make my cookies there sold at the farmer's market. The demand is so high, you know what? It's time for me to open up my own retail store. And as you're doing that, you are generating revenue, you're saving money, you're creating financial history. There's a time and a place where VCs come in, where investors come in, where loans come in. And I'll just speak from a lending perspective, since that's what I do and it's my job. For most banks, Pathway is not like that. But for traditional banks, they want you to be in business for at least 3 years and profitable 2 of those years. They want you to have a good credit score. They want you to be able to have equity into the deal. So if you're asking for an $80,000 oven for your bakery, can you put 20% down? And you have that 20%. And so that's what I would say for Gen Zers is to, I know everybody wants to be Mr. and Mrs. CEO, but at the same time, starting small is not bad. Having multiple businesses, like Justin was saying, is not bad to understand, but also working and observing. Because, for instance, me working, when I was a women's business center director, I met all the CEOs, all the CFOs, all the people in power and places that when I'm ready to launch my business, they'll say, yeah, Jalicia, we remember you. And that'll take you further, creating those authentic and realistic, friends. I say friendships, it's relationships. I'm trying to make friends with everybody. That's my whole perspective, but that's what I would say from a lending and funding your business perspective.
Okay, so that's some really good feedback. And I think that because we don't get the foundational knowledge about what it actually means to be in business, that's where we have the challenges. And Justin mentioned about being a necessity entrepreneur, which is like you're really trying to scramble, you're trying to figure out what you're going to do as opposed to trying to plan it out. So a lot of individuals think that going to business school is going to prepare you to run a business. Now, I don't have a master's of business administration, but I've gone through the process of trial and error over the last 20 years. So tell us what you mentioned the ecosystem, Jalicia, but so tell us like some proven steps or some proven places that you can actually get the knowledge that you need so that it can prepare you more for your journey in the next step instead of wasting your time. And I'll throw that out.
Okay. So I do have a master's in business administration, focus in accounting. So the accounting piece of business, I got that all day in, day out, financial statements, profit, loss, balance sheet, financial projections, you got it. Marketing, don't have it. Jada, what you would spend, knowledgeable. I know that's what you need to do. Am I the person to help you do it? No, I am not. So from that perspective, in the type of learner you are, the type of learner I am, I really can't apply something until like I'm on the job, like actually doing it. But what I would say for a small business owner, I'm gonna have to go back to that ecosystem because it's so important. Reaching out to people who actually understand. It goes to what Chelsea's saying about delegating. You have your strong suit as an entrepreneur. You're probably wearing the CEO hat in the beginning, or you're probably solopreneur doing everything. And I would say, as you're doing that, as you're doing everything, to take a step back and to analyze what is working and what is not working. If something is working really well, then you can continue that path or try to improve it. But everyone wants to be on social media. for their marketing. Social media is not the only form of marketing. And it's not necessarily the number one form of marketing. The real number one form of marketing is still referrals and word of mouth. If, you know, Ms. Anderson says, Charlize, you need to go with this construction company, I trust you. I'm going to go with this construction company. But what I would say is, as you're working through everything, to get into those ecosystem partners, to go to SCORE and get a mentor, find a mentor that is similar to your business and reach out to them. I actually have an entrepreneur that I'm working with. The business she's starting, she actually went on vacation, found this restaurant that she really likes and wants to duplicate it here in Memphis. And this restaurant is all the way, I think, out of California. And she reached out to the owner and said, hey, can you be my mentor and coach me through this? And so even being vulnerable in that sense of reaching out to someone and asking them for their assistance and help throughout the process. You know, a LinkedIn convo or phone call actually goes really far. You just have to be vulnerable enough to do that. But that's what I would say is find someone who has those expertise and ask them for their input. If you are, for our Gen Zers, if you're currently in college right now, go to your professors. If you have classmates or friends that have, you know, a background in a certain topic, well, this is a way for you to help them test their knowledge and their skill set. If they're learning marketing principles, you can dive in deeper into their expertise. But I would say MBAs are so focused on singular topics and things. You're becoming a specialist in this matter that business is a wide spectrum. And so I would say Epicenter, SCORE, University of Memphis, Pathway Lending. Find someone and talk to them. I think someone in the chat said community is so important. Community is so important. And the community also needs to be outside of your family and friends, because someone needs to tell you your baby is ugly. Your baby needs some work without it hurting your feelings, and there's no, you know, personal tie. And so that's what I would say about that.